G'day listeners and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Australia podcast, powered by Australian Property Scout Buyers Agency. I'm your host, Sammy Gordon, and today, guys, we've got an episode talking all things about why short-term thinking will cost you millions. And joining me in this studio today, as usual, in all black, except for his hair, Jimmy Ibrahim, mate, welcome back to the studio.
Wow, that was a new one. You've actually never said that, Sammy boy, but g'day to you.
Keep me guessing.
G'day to our lovely listeners out there, wherever you are listening from. You know, we've got quite a few clients that actually are overseas, Sammy boy, in all parts of the world, yes, listening, tuning into the podcast. So thank you for wherever you're listening.
100%, man. Mate, we've got a good topic today. And, mate, first cab off the rank. Firstly, I've got to mention the last podcast recorded was with Big Peter Contos, and people might remember that he did actually kick you out of his job. But once again, the money wasn't big enough for him. So, Jimmy, mate, you've thankfully, in your case here, and unfortunately for the listeners, kept your job for now. But, mate, Peter Contos' episode, that dropped earlier this week, mate. That was a bit of a banger. What do you reckon?
I love Peter. I love his family. His parents have got a great story as well. It's a very interesting story about Peter. He was a bit doubtful early days. He wasn't really too sure whether or not it was suitable for him.
He pushed the parents in their 60s through as a test dummies.
He did. What a good son. Sending your parents about to retire, you can afford to lose some money.
Thankfully, each of those properties has doubled since then. So
they have absolutely killed it, his parents.
Yes.
And so it's great. It's great. And since Peter has introduced quite a few of his friends as well. So we talk about your circle expanding. We talk about how you can impact other people's lives and just look what Peter's done, with his family, with his friends, and their conversations, I'm sure, are going to be very different to only a few years ago in terms of what they're discussing in the future and getting excited. So it's just such a great story.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. And mate, I think it's a good sort of segue, obviously, of talking from what he did, and obviously short term. So it kind of popped into my head of obviously what he achieved. I'm actually going to touch on this as well, guys, because we had a lot of people reaching out going, hang on, how did Peter do 12 deals in 12 months? Obviously, there's wait times, there's everything else happening. Just want to hit the nail on the head with that one early as well. And I think the important thing to note with Pete, for one, he started, the acquisition plan of when he actually started acquiring as hard as he did was mid-2024. So obviously a lot of things sort of blew out. Stock became very, very tight over December, January, earlier this year, December 24, January 2025. We obviously closed our books, played a bit of catch up, but he obviously had like half a dozen in the tank before then as well. But it also came down to different things. Like a lot of people are like, oh, if I start with, I've got enough of a deposit for, one deal, how likely is it I can do the same sort of thing? And the answer, quite simply, is not at all. You've got to rewind to people's episodes like Bailey's, Bailey's episode of 3 properties in the first 12 months. Ella Woolcott, 5 properties in a 24-month window as well. Like these are the things that are attainable and achievable for investors starting with a singular deposit, and even starting with a double deposit. It takes time to sort of get through and do these things too. And he was lucky that he was fortunate, I guess, more than lucky that he was obviously starting the journey, that acquisition piece in mid-2024. He was also a mentoring client of mine, which obviously carries a bit of a different level within it as well, as everyone who attended the summit, the boot camp would know. But then also, he loaded the tank. He loaded the barrel when he needed to sell to get equity. He sold down to release those cash deposits, and that allowed him that really, really accelerated rapid growth that he experienced over that time frame in the portfolio. There was also a duplex in there that counted. We obviously counted as a double in the portfolio too. So very, very impressive story from Pete. Really, really good potty. I really enjoyed recording with him as well. And obviously, testament to what he was willing to put on the line and go all in as well, man.
Are you referring, Sammy, to, because some of the clients are saying that at the moment, you can only get 2 deals at one time. So how does that work to get to 12? That's what we're essentially talking about,
right? Yeah, pretty much, man. Pretty much. And like he was able to load up, like when he had his first little run as well. I think he literally went through like 3 or 4. I think it was 3 almost immediately, and then kind of another 3 like very quickly after that as well, which obviously was in the back end of 2024. And then, like obviously with different people with different wait times, but also there's obviously the different thing. We've got different assets that you can acquire at different amounts, commercials in there too, which falls outside those standard parameters too. So it's also different times, man, where we're also now at different price points for the most point across the board, where most people wouldn't have the actual capacity or capability from both a borrowing and an actual capital position to be able to do the same level too. Because we are in different times, different markets, different price points as well, different yields too. So yeah, man, it's an interesting time with that to take that into equation. But that being said, 12 properties in 12 months is obviously an anomaly result. It's a massive result that Big Pete's achieved, but it doesn't mean you can't do 4, 6, 8 deals in a year, which is still a monstrous achievement. And man, I even had a conversation with some mentoring clients this week about it as well. And they, some other mentoring clients, and they were really hoping to do something similar. But at the end of the day, man, everyone starts in a different position. And you should never really like assess how you've done. Like they're going to hit 7 deals by the end of the year, right? We're tweaking a few things and we're going to get their 7th deal in before the end of the year, which is a massive result. And these guys are like 5, 6 years younger than Pete as well. And the compounding effect of what they're going to do in that sort of time frame is massive. And by the time they get to his age of 5, 6 years, they're going to have a significantly bigger portfolio as well, most likely. And man, I think it's interesting because everyone kind of almost judges themselves against what other people are doing, or they look at that, they take that into account. And just because you got the ability to do 3, 4 deals at once doesn't mean you're going to get to that level that quickly, because we need equity releases, borrowing capacity, all the rest of the sort of thing that comes into it. But it's always relevant to what the individual's goal and actual capability is as well. So yeah, man, I kind of just wanted to, I guess, sort of dive into that a little bit at the start. Just popped into my head as we started, because I think it's very relevant when people are building their portfolios to take into account their own personal situation and how scalable that is as well.
It's a really good introduction to this actual topic, because the topic is why short-term thinking could be costing you millions. Yes. I believe that's the title you're running with. When you think about, I mean, I've never bought 12 properties in 12 months. So if you compare yourself and you narrow your window of what you can achieve, just thinking about that, you're missing the point of what this is all about. This is all about being consistent with your actions over a sustainable period of time. And I know we've always said, and previously, one of my favorite quotes is, consistency will always outperform intensity. So just because someone can buy 12 properties in 12 months, doing that every year, can they do that? Maybe not. But what can you do? Because not everyone's going to be able to do it. Very limited people are going to be able to do that. So if that's your benchmark, you're actually talking yourself out. You're actually focusing on the completely wrong thing, and you're talking yourself out of what you need to do because your benchmark is completely irrelevant. It's like, this is not helping you. It's not serving you. So for any listener out there, don't misunderstand. If you're even doing a couple of deals per year, who do you know in your circle that is doing 2 properties per year over 5 to 10 years? No one. You don't know, unless you're in the APS community. No one is doing it. Less than 1% of investors will ever own 5 or more properties in their life. So if you're doing that in 3 years, you are ahead of 99% of people. So just for people just to cool the jets a little bit and just think, what can I do? How can I focus on where I'm at? And just let that dictate your accumulation.
Yeah.
And sometimes remember my journey. I think there was like 10 months I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And we had that conversation. You're like, man, what are you doing? And I was like, yeah, changing brokers. I was making some excuses, blah, blah, blah. I didn't do anything for nearly 12 months. So there are going to be times where you're going to go heavy and you're going to go hard. There are some times where life gets in the way and you're not.
For sure. And I think, man, this is one of the things, like, especially around mentoring, right? And one of the biggest reasons I want to bring mentoring in was because of the consistency of having those calls with me on that regular basis. And this is the thing of, like, for you, and what popped into my mind just then was, for you, I remember we recorded your pod at the start of the year, and then when we got towards the end of the year, you're like, fuck, mate, we've got the summit coming up and I haven't bought anything in this time frame. And that was the kick up your ass to do it. And that's what, like, I realized so much, especially with the mentoring guys, having that, whether it's quarterly check-in or even more frequently than that with me, they don't want to bring something to the table where they haven't done anything, they haven't made any moves. They're constantly moving the needle on that front. Yeah. And that's the whole idea of mentoring, is to push them forward within that too. So it's it's one of those things, man. And like, realistically, if we'd had quarterly, calls booked in or whatever, I wouldn't let you get away with the excuses that you were using to not do it, and swapping brokers, accountants, all the rest of the sort of thing. But it's a momentum building of doing those actions. There's absolutely critical and crucial. And I think the other thing with Pete as well is, I think when we realized at the end of last year that the next 2 deals that were going to fall into the start of this year, we're going to hit 8. And then we could see on the horizon, like, it was actually possible, especially with the sale of the first primary residency was going to offload. We kind of had the cash plus a little bit of an equity strip to maybe hit the 10 deals in that time frame. 10 to 11 deals in that time frame, because we were trying to go for 10 deals in 12 months. And just so happened that obviously one of those final deals was also a duplex, and then the SMSF came around that we could do as well. So it just kind of like, and the SMSF as well, guys, is one of those things that's outside of that normal curriculum and criteria as well. So it's it's possible, it's doable, but it's just like, just because he's done it doesn't mean it's not possible for someone else to do, 6 deals in a year, 4, 6, 8, whatever it is, or even exactly as you're saying there too. Don't get hung up on that one example and that one result of a mentoring client compared to what actually is doable and possible as well. So it's, because even if you think about it, if all you did was, and not say if all you did, but if you did 2 deals a quarter, if you sold something and you had $1 million in the bank and you wanted to do 2 deals a quarter, that's 8 deals in a year. That's pretty bloody impressive. Throw a commercial in on top of maybe an SMSF or something else, you can still get to 12 to 10 deals in a year. So it's just because you've got that initial amount, it doesn't mean you're not going to have to go through this run up piece to go alongside it as well.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. And also just the mentoring clients, like for people thinking out there, well, why is he doing that? Mentoring clients, and especially the mentor clients that you work with, there is an exchange there. This isn't a complimentary service. There is a cause and effect. So not everyone is prepared to pay for a certain amount of money in order to get a result, right? 100%. So that exchange, you got to ask yourself, well, what are you prepared to do to get a result that's going to be different to everyone else?
For sure.
Not everyone's going to do that.
For sure. And there was obviously a commitment piece has to come with it well, for one, the monetary commitment is one side of things, showing people how committed they really are on that end. Because money to me doesn't really mean anything, but it shows the commitment of willing to actually do 100%. It rather than just talking about 100%. It. But then also the willingness and the commitment of doing a certain number of deals in that time frame as well. Because that's what I said, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's not for anyone that doesn't want to go hard. Like that is what it's for. And I've seen that in the result of pretty much all of them will hit minimum half a dozen deals this year that have gone down that avenue too. And obviously the uplifts and everything comes alongside that too. So it's been a crazy year, man, and something awesome to be able to dissect and help people with as well. But on that note, jumping into today's episode. So Jimmy, why short-term thinking will cost you millions?
It's an interesting topic, Sammy. Yes. It's an interesting topic. And I think the interesting thing here is what is short-term, right? Because a lot of things we're going to talk about today, the time frame really does change, right? So and in relation to property, in relation to your mindset. So I think as we go along, we'll just sort of mention different timeframes just to make it a bit more specific and a bit more relevant. But I think a really good place to start is just the trap of short-term gratification. And I think from my experience, when I look back at my own journey and I speak to some clients at the front end when they're starting out, it is people getting confused as to what is really going to move the needle. And almost, you're trying to be someone you're not, and you're trying to keep up with people that you shouldn't be, and you're worrying about what people think that they don't really care. And so I think just starting from this baseline of the trap of short-term gratification, because think about it, in the world that we live in, everything's at a push button, everyone wants everything yesterday. I think that is where people initially in their own headspace are doing themselves a disservice. And it will cost you millions because you end up spending money on stupid things. Right, let's talk about that first of all. Spending money on short-term crap, really. So you got a car that's worth more than you can afford. Why do you need and you got a loan and it's stopping you from borrowing money?
No, this is one of the big things, man. I think one of the biggest things we always see people go through, and the biggest issue that I think we see people go through, is they need that quick win, that quick dopamine hit, that social proofing. Yes. You know what I mean? Like that image that they're wealthier than they are. Man, like a lot of people don't even know, before I started business, I didn't have a social media. I had Facebook for years and then I deactivated Facebook. I never had Instagram. I started Instagram when I started the business because I knew I needed it from that side. But then outside of that, man, and literally the year that I started it, dude, was like the year that I had a business. My first year of business, man, I probably had like 500 followers, like max. You know what I mean? And it was just like, and I could have probably, if I'd been smarter, maybe when I was younger, maybe I could have, if I thought that this was the path I was going to go down, maybe I could have documented my story. But dude, I accelerated in the shadows. Like no one knew what I was doing. My family didn't even know what I was doing. And you don't need to, like, it's this idea of needing to show it all off or show shit off that you don't actually even have or you can't even afford. It's like the people you think you're going to attract by doing that aren't the right people anyway. It's as simple as that. So it's like you want to make sure that you're focusing on what is actually genuinely going to move the needle and build you something significant. Because if those actions and that fake bullshit isn't going to get you there, then what is the actual point of doing it? And the simple answer is there is no point in doing it other than, potentially getting people around yourself that you don't need around, but also getting yourself potentially into more debt than you should and bad debt rather than good debt. And things like this so easily slow down the equation and slow down the momentum of what you're going to do by going through that piece of not accepting and embracing delayed gratification. I did that podcast with both sides just recently, and I sort of forgotten because I hadn't talked about my story in quite a while, and specifically around the fact that I drove around in cars that were worth like less than $5,000 until I was 28. I think at 28, I bought myself a brand new Triton, 4x4, 32 grand I paid for this thing brand new. And until then, man, I'd driven an 88 bloody Corolla when I was in my teens. Then I
still going.
Mate, then I bought, and I gave it a Sadney, he blew it up. And then I had it actually blew up at a set of traffic lights at the Meccano set in Sydney, in the middle of the Meccano set, the idiot. And then, man, I had an old Discovery, an old Land Rover Discovery that I could take off the track road. Mate, it was a $5,000 car. Then I had the old Ford 1-tonner, just farm you. When that thing blew up, then I had the Ford 1-tonner farm you, mate, which was worth a couple of grand. And like that delayed gratification piece, like, yes, I didn't feel great driving it around, you know what I mean? And especially when I didn't have like-minded people around. Like, I know there's a lot of people like Bales for one, man. He drives the old shitbox. He almost like embraces it. He almost wants it to look more shit than what it is. So it's almost like, eat shit, get rich. Like I'm taking it on, and I'm owning this thing. And man, I think this is where people need to understand that piece and that delayed gratification piece. Sorry to steal your thunder here. I've gone on a tangent.
It's so
but, man,
true.
it's so important to not try and seem like you are something that you are not.
Yeah.
And especially when you're not there yet. Because I guarantee you, it will actually stop you so much earlier from achieving what you actually can achieve than if you embraced it. And then how quickly can something like that actually get there, and actually come to fruition, come to the table. And I actually never bought that ute that I bought brand new until I had cash in the bank from a sale. When I sold the unit, I went and did that little dev, the little dual lock dev, and I went and bought the unit block and fully renovated my first unit block, the 4-pack. And then, man, I had about 30 grand left over and I went and bought the ute and I bought it in cash. And man, I believe so wholeheartedly that this is one of the strongest ways that you can actually really embrace your journey and propel it to a level that nothing else can, is just being willing to eat shit and to get rich. You know what I mean? Literally.
And let's face it, most people, I mean, I love the saying eat shit and get rich, but for most
people, you do it every day.
I try to. And also, actually, just before I go into my comment, a big shout out to early days Sammy Gordon on the Instagram, the Wise Wednesday. If you haven't listened to the early Instagram, ladies and
Wise Wednesdays, hot tip of the week.
If you have not gone on a deep dive, do you still have them? You didn't.
I think they're up, right?
You better not have removed them.
I think the very first post I ever did.
Is still there?
It's still there. Is the one, and I'm almost like whispering because it's at night and my family's also.
I remember.
Like yeah, that's still there. I left it up as a reminder. You're going to be scrolling for a while, guys.
Scroll all the way down to the bottom, folks, because you will see.
G'day, guys. It's Sammy Gordon here from Australian Property Scout. I'm here for your Wise Wednesdays and your hot tip of the week.
And the reason why I say that is there are some absolute cracking tips there, Sammy. When you used to do those Wise Wednesday tips of the week, there were so many cracking tips that you recorded. And I think it just goes to show people this is... It's not a short-term journey. That's the whole point of when you listen to those and you see where you started from. You even put the suit on for some of them.
I did. That was 1 a.m., bro, that suit.
He put the suit on after a big day on the farm, and that's where you started. So this is a quintessential short-term thinking. If you're playing the long game, you'll get the results. So
quintessential. We've got Paulie Den back on the podcast with the vocabulary from Melbourne. Bloody hell.
I love those Wise Wednesdays. Anyway, getting back to the trap of pretending to be rich, Sammy boy.
We're 20 minutes in where we've said
this is an important point because the short-term thinking is going to cost you millions of dollars because you don't understand your false sense of security is fooling no one. And I think you've labored the point. Is that the word I'm looking for? The one thing I will say, when I do these the calls with discovery calls on the front line, and people are questioning the education piece and coming on board as an APS member, and then I ask them, okay, yeah, but we're going on holidays at the end of the year, and how much are you spending on holidays? We'll probably spend somewhere 30, 40 grand. And you want to achieve what? Yeah, but we want to achieve wealth. And guys, and I say, I don't mean to be rude, but do you think this is owed to you? Like, is this something that you believe that you should, this is not going to the grocery store and picking up something and going home and we've done it. Like, where are you spending your money? I'm not against anyone having a holiday, But you're going on holidays, pretending to be a baller, and you're spending this amount of money, and you're debating whether or not something is actually going to change your life over your whole life.
Yeah.
And we're having this conversation. I'm like, where's your reality check? And I'm not saying that to be mean. I've been there in that same position, and someone's given me the reality check. So I think what we're getting at, the trap of the short-term gratification is understand the law of the cause and effect. Right? You can't reap what you don't sow. You can't get what you're not prepared to give in the first place. So if you're not prepared to have that delayed gratification, what makes you think you should deserve to get the result in the end? If you just think about that as a very simple concept, then it'll question the decisions you make.
Man, a very simple thing here is like, there's an old saying, right? Like Rome wasn't built in a day. It took many, many years, like thousands of years, really, to get to the pinnacle of the size that it was at the time it was, right? And man, the simple fact is like, to build what we're trying to do these days to the size of what we're trying to do, and for people to achieve what they're trying to achieve. I find it very funny when people have an issue with paying for something like education, or paying to use someone that has done what you're trying to do before, right? But there is an inherent cost between you not understanding, and when I say cost here, I'm going to go into this because it's a compounded cost rate. We'll call it that, right? CCR, compounded cost rate. There we go.
I love it.
And so there is inherent cost associated with doing the wrong things versus doing the right things. And you do the right things well, and they keep moving you forward. The compounded growth rate of that is going to be significant. It's like when the superannuation things, they show the arms of the different guys versus different performance rates versus them, right? So you have this compounded growth rate of something doing the correct thing for you, and then you have the compounded cost rate of something maybe not doing the same thing or getting a diminished return.
Yeah.
And this goes along with even what I was saying before around the mentoring clients and being able to move them through more quickly. Because of those stop points that they have to go through. They know, I'm speaking to Sammy in 6 weeks, I need to get everything lined up, ready for the next batch of purchase. I need to get these equity numbers. I need to get everything I can, figure out what I need to do. Is there anything I need to set up before this next round of acquisition? I need to get all this moving, and maybe it's the same time as a couple of purchases going through, but I'm getting all across everything I need to move it forward. Now, that's a compounded growth rate from a time perspective, but then that obviously compounds into a dollar perspective as well. And so this compounded cost rate, which should go the other way, it's like, what is that difference costing you? Both the lack of correct information, the lack of correct execution versus the correct information, correct execution being done, and the time piece being brought forward as well. Because just like, think about one thing. If you were to buy $500,000 assets and over a 5-year window, you bought 2 a year every year without fail, and you ended up at 10, versus if you just did 8 a year, 8 in that time frame, so 2 a year, but maybe you dropped off 1 year, or 1 year only did 1 versus the 2 or whatever, and you only got to 8 properties in that 5-year window. Now, let's say they were all in great growth locations that doubled over a 5-year, or just doubled in whatever time frame it was. Let's say they were the same markets you bought them in, but you missed those 2 deals. And those 2 deals are worth $500,000 each, right? $500,000 each. That compounded cost rate just cost you $1 million because you didn't pick up those extra 2 assets that doubled in value in that time frame and hit $1 million. And what you would find is the further that you went with this, the more that there's someone that did the 2 a year, or maybe the 2 a year scaled into 3 or 4 a year, versus the guy that's only doing 1 a year or 2 a year and doesn't really pick it up. Maybe they have a year off. By the time you get to year 10, you're talking someone that might have like a 20x portfolio or 20 property portfolio, someone that might only have a 10 to 15, but then also that compounded actual growth rate of each of those deals and what they produce, the return would be significant. It would be multi-millions of dollars. And all we're talking about doing is sticking to the game plan of that, correct education, correct execution. And that's where, like, I just don't understand when people aren't willing to pay for the correct information and from someone that's done what they're trying to do, because we've seen so many times before of someone saying, oh, I put it off for 12 months, I put it off for X amount of time, and then they come in and then they do it, and their mind's blown by what they didn't know.
Yeah. 100%.
And the simple thing is you don't know what you don't know, and you can't execute at a level that you don't know how to execute at. It's as simple as that. So I think, man, the biggest thing with this is really understanding that compounding cost rate versus a compounding growth rate, and what is going to give you the biggest return.
I think about that 12 months that I didn't buy anything, and it's a blood boiler. Like, I think back and I'm like kicking myself because I'm like, you're an idiot.
The markets you missed.
You are an idiot. And the money that you have to pay to get into deals now compared to back then, I'm like, I'm an idiot. And I don't have as much time as some of these young clients. Yeah. You're right. So yeah, we all feel it. But it's, what do you do next? Do you just say, poor me, and I missed the window and it's never going to happen again? Or do you just take action and go, you know what? Yeah, I missed that. Let's learn from that and let's move forward. Let's focus on what we can do. Perfect. All right.
man.
So, Sammy, did you have a specific way you wanted to go this? Because I've got a couple of points, but why don't you segue us?
Yeah, 100%.
If you like?
Dude, I think I think the true crux of this thing, right, is true wealth. Like building true wealth takes time.
Yes.
Right. And so this short-term thinking will cost you millions is what we want to do is we want to have a long-term view of what we want to achieve, both with the strategy piece, which includes the exit strategy and the strategy in terms of how we're going to build this thing, the acquisition plan and the consolidation plan, everything that goes with it. But we have to understand that it does take time, but the little things on the way through is what's actually going to get you there. So it's almost like a double whammy thing of like understanding the long-term view, but then not letting the short-term view affect that long-term game plan. And so that can come through a few different forms. And the first one could be something like negative cash flow and like seeing a deal, at current interest rates in a great growth location that might cost you 10 to 15 grand a year, right? But if you significantly back that area, it's a $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 property, and it's going to do at least 10% growth that year. Maybe you make 5% on the way in or whatever as well. We know we're going to outperform and outpace that negative cash flow we're going to carry on the way through.
By a country mile.
100%. But we know that interest rates are also coming back. We're seeing yields increase in a lot of areas as well. So we know we're sort of going to get that double whammy regardless of the cash flows improving over time. But I see a lot of the time people taking that short-term view of, I'm not going to pick those deals up now. I'm going to wait for interest rates to come back, or I'm going to wait for this or wait for that. And what we've seen is the longer that people do this and they wait and all the rest of it, the more that it costs them over that longer period of time as well. And man, combined with that piece too is, like almost on the flip side of it as well, is the patience that needs to be done, right? So true wealth takes time to build. It takes a long time to build a truly wealthy position. And to me, a wealthy position in all reality, wealthy, like true wealth, not rich. Like rich comes before wealthy. True wealth, man, is probably at like a 10 mil net mark, right? Like in reality, in Australia, that I believe that's actually what's considered high net worth, and then ultra high net worth is 30 mil plus. So man, it takes time to build to that amount. Now it takes patience, but it also takes that needing to push hard early too. But which sounds very counterintuitive, but what I mean by that is like you need to move all the needles, move all the pieces in the puzzle, all the chess pieces on the board to get yourself into the acquisition piece as soon as possible. But then you also need to understand that acquiring the right deal can also take time. So it's like those two pieces of understanding we need to move everything as quick as we can to get into the position to be able to buy. But it's almost like, there's a saying in business, right? Be slow, what is it? Slow to hire, quick to fire sort of thing. It's almost like you want to get yourself into the right position, do everything you can in the right time. But then when something's ready to go, pull the trigger, be ready to pull the trigger on that front as well. So man, I think it's really important to start to understand that. And it sounds counterintuitive, but the simple fact is that both are extremely important in this. We want to move them as quick as we can, but also have that patience piece to be able to execute at the right level.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's paramount to get this thing right, because you get that wrong. And we see it happen so often with people that get FOMO of like, they've been saving for 3 years, or maybe they've been waiting 6 months to get that reval, and they get the reval and they strip the equity and they just buy the first thing they see. Or they take 3 years to save a deposit, or 6 months to get a pre-approval, bang, they get it and they just buy the first thing they see. They don't take that time to be, whether it's a market expert or engaging someone who will take that time to source the correct deal for you. And the perfect synergy of that in that combination, man, is what will almost guarantee the results of that longer term net wealth position that we're chasing.
Mate, you're 100% true. It's interesting when you said the cash flow focus, especially for clients that you see. I can't begin to tell you on the amount of intro calls that we do with clients where someone does not quite understand the concept of that. And I know we're laboring the point here, but just to reiterate, if you break it down really simply, if someone said to you, give me $5,000 and at the end of the year, I'm going to give you 50 grand, would you do it?
Yeah, of course.
The answer is of course.
Yeah.
But when we say, but the reason why we're not going to try and get $5,000 in our pocket today is because holding this property might cost us $5,000.
Yeah.
But we have the opportunity to make 50 or 100 grand or whatever. But let's just say 50 grand, right? That should be a no-brainer for you, because how long will it take you to make that 50 grand? So when people are trying to
even
question,
10 versus 20, you know what I mean? Like it's a double.
do
like it doesn't need to be a 10x return, but even a doubling return, like it's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer even at 10 grand. So that's why when people like focusing on that short-term focus, you mentioned cash flow. That's one big one. The other one is negative gearing. I mean, how much is that a short-term focus for people thinking, I'm going to buy the wrong asset because I want to save some money on tax. We see that every single day of the week, focusing on the wrong thing.
That's just an uneducated investor.
But that's what this whole podcast is about. Is just bringing up points that people need to acknowledge. Negative gearing is one of them. The other one is, first home buyers grant. People thinking this, I have to buy a property with I had a call last week, bless him, and the guy was adamant he wanted to buy a first home and he wanted us to buy. I said, dude, we don't do that. I can't help you. No, but you guys are the best. You need to do this. No, we don't do that. Why do you want to do that? Because I want to get the government's thing. And trying to reason with this guy, he didn't quite understand. His short-term thinking was, let me cash in on what the government's giving me. I'm going to buy the wrong asset. He wanted to rent out a bedroom of it. I'm like, dude, this is not going to help you. Like, do you understand?
Yeah.
So that short-term thinking is going to cost him a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we see this time and time again, right? And that's what this podcast is essentially about, is bringing up little things for you to acknowledge and understand. If you're educated, great. If you're not educated and you're learning and you're early in the process, these are the pitfalls. These are the things that you really need to make sure that you avoid. The other one I want to throw to you, Sammy, renovating for quick flips.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that? I mean, how often do you see people thinking, I could make an easy 30, 40 grand renovating?
Yeah.
They've got no idea. They see the block.
Man, it's the same as developing, I think. Like, you kind of get the combination between the two. And I think you really have to be, like, if anything, man, like renovating, flipping, deving, all the rest of the sort of thing, it's a longer term strategy. It's not for at the start. And even if it is to come in at all at any point during the track, like, man, I used to do some developing probably through my mid-tier of my investing stage. Actually, I started quite early, right? In the developing space. My second deal I developed. My first deal I renovated. But man,
because you had to.
I didn't have to. If I understood the strategy better, I wouldn't have.
Okay.
And so I did. So, to answer that, no, I didn't have to.
Okay.
I thought I had to, but I didn't have to.
Okay.
And man, I think like in reality can take you out of the market for so long. And that the short-term thinking piece on this is you think, oh yeah, sweet, I'm going to make 100, 150K. But what if it takes you out of the market for 18 to 24 months and it stops you from being able to scale into additional deals? Like I know if I did a dev and was to make, let's just say on a normal house and land or something, and I knew I was going to make 150K on it, but it was going to take me out of the market for 18 months. I know that if with that same amount of money, because you need to put a higher LVR, a higher deposit into it as well, lower LVR, I know that I could roll that into probably at least 2 deals. That within 6 months, I could probably pull it out and roll into another 2 deals. There's no way with 4 deals out there in the marketplace, I can't outperform that singular dev that's going to potentially make 150 grand. So man, I think people, they get too caught up in these things of like, I need to do this strategy or that strategy or whatever it is, when so often the simple things done correctly will outperform the complicated things, so often. Even the complicated things done correctly, I don't believe it outperforms the simple things done right, especially with your renos and your flips and your devs and everything, because the time factor, the cost of in and out and all the rest of the sort of thing, man, the compounding effect of doing the simple things correctly and leveraging that and scaling that, I don't believe you can beat it.
It's funny because most people think initially you have to develop to make money, and it's just, it can't be more of the opposite that I found personally from my own position. If anything, why wouldn't you just buy in a market that's going to do most of the heavy lifting that you don't have to do anything? That just seems like the best outcome.
I've barely developed in years. Like I've done a couple of subdivisions in the last couple of years. They were just sites that just like I picked up for really cheap, so it made sense to chop it. And I sold the blocks. I didn't bother building on it because that component didn't stack enough to make enough sense for me to do it. I sold the block and then sold the existing house. It just made sense when the market went through growth to do it, to sell them like that. But man, like I really haven't touched anything for a long time from a development perspective. I've done a lot of renovations, but I reno to hold. So I'll buy an area to renovate. I'll buy, let's say, a completely dilapidated shit house property, renovate it, hold it through the cycle and sell it at the back end. So it's a stacked strategy. It's a multi-layered strategy, not just doing it to flip, because so often, someone might do it and make 50, 70 grand or something like that. Now, if you needed to build a capital base, you didn't know how to do anything else, okay, maybe that makes sense. But like if you were to do 2 of them in a year versus maybe you could scale into 2 or 3 deals a year instead, also not taking you away from the work piece, you're always going to be able to outperform and outscale that form of investing than just doing the renovation in a flat market or a stale or a stagnant market as well. So the only caveat on it is if you can do it in a market that is growing. But even then, if you can retain the asset and actually hold it through a growth cycle, that is going to give you the ultimate result out of it rather than just the reno to flip.
Yeah. And if you've had results in the past, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for the future. You might know a market really well and you've done all these subdivisions, price points moved, and that doesn't stack up anymore. You can't flog a dead horse.
And if you don't understand market cycles, you could buy something on top of the cycle thinking, oh, well, the market's going to keep running. I'll pay this bit of a premium for it because I know, well, last time I did it, the market lifted by 10 or 20% in that window. So I know I can do it. Or maybe it lifted by even more in that same window as well. But then you may buy it at the top or pay a premium. So you might buy it at the top and pay a premium for it. And then the market comes back 20%. You might do that dev that you maybe we're going to make 10% on or something. You might end up losing 10, 20, 30% on as well with the comeback as well in the actual market movement too. So there's a lot to consider there, man, really when it comes to that aspect. So I'm not really a fan of it, unless it was your pure strategy and it was all you did and you did it in a niched market and maybe you were a builder or something like that. That's the only time to me that it would make sense, potentially. And again, I would weigh it up, cost versus return analysis on the other strategies versus this one. And so often, if you're a builder in a certain area, well, could you be just doing more builds or doing more renos or anything like that? Or maybe one primary residence project for yourself every 12 to 18 months, something like that. And then hedging and stacking a different strategy elsewhere in literal growth markets that are going to give you that massive uplift.
What's your thoughts on, and I know you've mentioned this before, so it's a rhetorical question, but, market timing versus time in the market, right? From a short-term focus. When you think the conventional way of investing, they would always say, as long as it's time in the market, right? Don't worry about trying to time the market because you'll never time it correctly. What's your take on that?
My honest opinion on that is probably almost the opposite to what the topic of the conversation is, because to me, that's almost taking like this, in my opinion, like silly long-term view on something that like, oh, well, over the long term, it's going to produce X. Let's say over the long term, we know, or we think, there's no guarantees in any of this thing, but we think it's going to continue to perform at a 7 to 10% growth rate over the next 7 to 10 years or whatever, and hopefully double. The simple fact is that markets don't move in a linear fashion. They don't move, as a slow, steady 4, 5, 7, 10% increase over a 10, 20 year window. It just doesn't do that. It moves in extremely sharp up cycles. And it also moves in sharp down cycles and then long periods of linear growth. And typically a lot of the time, no growth. We look at Perth, Brisbane, Adelaide. They did nothing from 2007 till, market dependent, 2019 to 2021, really. Like most of them didn't do anything from 2007 to 2021. That's when they started their proper cycle, 2020, 2021. So it's only like 13 to 14 years that you would have sat out of the game as an investor, or not out of the game, but like making no money, inflation devaluing the actual net value of your asset, and also the net equity position in your asset as well. Devaluing it over that period of time, and if anything, a lot of those properties actually went backwards in value. So it's like, the time in the market side of things, to me, it just makes no sense. We have enough data these days to prove that strategy is incorrect. It's as simple as that. There is so much data out there. There's so many graphs out there showing that this is incorrect, that the idea of time in the market is the best way to invest. Yes, the best way to invest if you're lazy and you don't know what you're doing and you just want to park. Even then, it's not the best way to invest. Like, still time a market that we believe is going to go through a strong growth cycle, because you're going to get a double whammy over a 15-year window. Versus if you'd bought into Perth, or Brisbane, Adelaide in 2008 or 2007, 2008, 2010, you would have held for 10 years and done nothing. And we saw that. We bought a lot of properties in those 2019, 2021, 22 windows that people had bought in 2007, 8, 9, 10, and they hadn't done anything, or they were actually selling them for $50,000 to $100,000 less than what they paid for them. So it's whilst this I guess idea is irrelevant in the conversation of it, it's almost it's the opposite, right? And I think that like, markets, especially when it comes to growth, you should look at markets at a short to medium term prospect. I don't like long-term prospects except for cash flow plays. But everything that we should be looking at from a growth perspective should be looked at from a short to medium term perspective. So what is this asset going to provide us? What is this asset going to give us in a 6, 12, 36 month window, maybe like a 60 month, like a 5-year window max? So 6 months, 12 months to like 3 to 5 years max. What is that property going to produce in that cycle, in that time frame? Now, let's be honest, if it was a 50% growth rate, just 50% in a 5-year window, man, like that over like 100% over that 10 to 15 year window, I would take the 50% every day and then try and stack it multiple times and put multiple properties in there and continue to move it from that end. But realistically, like that 50% in that time frame, if you're going to get 50%, you would have to have timed the market incorrectly and bought like 2 to 3 years too early and then seen that upcycle on the back end of it. You know, so because so often if you time the market correctly, you will get it on that, you would get it on that uplift, which typically lasts for 3 years max. I haven't seen too many markets grow more than 3 to 4 years max. Sydney, 2013 to 2017. Melbourne, 2014 to 2018. Perth did pretty much a 3 year run of 2021 to 2024. It does look like potentially moving back into a growth cycle, depending what happens over the next 12 months as well. But like Adelaide, man, was like a sort of a 4 year cycle, and it's like capped, like affordability wise, that market is cooked, you know? So it's like they typically run really hard for 4 years. 3, 4, 5 years, absolute max, and then they're done. So if you were to hold it then, if your market was absolutely capped from an affordability perspective, what are the chances it's going to run again in that time frame? Very, very small. So, you know, the idea of holding for another 10 years, you know, or 10 to 15 years for hopefully that cycle to kick again, that inflationary pressure is going to devalue the equity that you've made. It's the actual profit you've made in the deal. Inflation is going to eat that away. Plus all your maintenance, your negative cash flow. Like if you pull extra equity out to then go to other deals, it just doesn't make sense. It actually significantly impacts your portfolio by doing that strategy.
Mate, you've absolutely nailed that. That's perfect.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah, well done.
Even though it was a completely irrelevant topic to what we're talking about.
The reason
I guess like if we look at that reverse piece of where we went into it, it actually does make a lot of sort of sense to bring up, because even though it's counterintuitive, it's why, like, yeah, the short-term thing, I don't know, costing you millions, like, it's maybe like the long-term thing anyway, whatever. But it's like, I think it's a very relevant point to make regardless.
Yeah. The reason why I wanted to bring up that point is because it is counterintuitive. And there are certain things when we talk about the time frame, this clearly shows if you time the market well, that you're going to get a much bigger upside. So the lazy approach is just sitting long-term, and sometimes you don't need to be that. You need to be focusing on the short term.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on your list that you have?
No, man, I've got one final thing I'll probably wrap this thing up with. But what about you? What else you got to punch through?
No, I think we've covered a lot of those points. I think if you go for it.
Man, I think like the sort of final piece, it's you got to figure out what you want to be as an investor. And there's sort of like multiple layers of like how you're going to be as an investor. But you've either got to be, there's two pieces, right? You're going to be a passive or an active investor. Passive investor, buy for long-term growth, and use that as an excuse as to why you're actually a shit investor and you're not going to get a result over the next 10 years. But you're a passive investor. You're a long-term investor. You buy and hold, right? Like this is what you're identifying yourself as in this scenario. So you're a shit investor, pretty much, right? Or you're an active investor that's trying to make things happen and you're moving quickly through markets. And there's nothing wrong. Like I always thought like trading was a dirty word when it came to property many years ago, like 10, 15 years ago when I first started, because I remember hearing everyone talk about the buy and hold for the long term. You know, property produces this over this period of time. Literally look at the graphs. I'm going to put a graph up somewhere to break this thing down properly. We did it at the summit last year, but the peaks and troughs in the way that markets move, and then the flatline periods or even the backwards periods during the downtimes, during the flat periods as well. You want to be an active investor if you want to retire in a decent window.
Yes.
And this is the whole thing. Like, if you're happy to retire in 30 years, a passive, shit investor strategy to buy and hold for the long term, mad. You probably will retire in 30 years. I don't think it's mad. I think it's terrible. But like, yes, you potentially will retire in 30 years. I don't want that. And I don't want that for any of our clients as well. If that's the sort of thing that any listener to Scouting Australia is listening and that's the strategy they want to follow, we're not the buyer's agent for you. And we're not the School of Property isn't the education platform for you. And Scouting Australia podcast isn't the podcast for you. So I probably recommend jumping off and going and listen to something shit like. But then outside of that, in all reality, and again, we're talking about active investors, so good investors like us, and then shit passive investors like them and their strategy, and that's ultimately how long it's going to take you to probably retire. Hence, in line with their expensive strategic plan as well. Anyway, moving on from that piece, it also breaks down the two side of things of being a strategic investor versus a reactive investor, right? And I think it's important to sort of break that down because like a strategic proactive investor is trying to get ahead of these things and actually move their money properly and keep it moving and keep it working for you. And that velocity of money, keep it producing for you in a really active, almost aggressive way. That's how we want to do it. Money produces money when you know how to work it. And so working it properly, farming it properly, building it aggressively in that style versus being reactive and sort of coming in after and needing to see everyone else, needing to see a result of something else first before making that decision. It's really being, active with that and strategic with that and aggressive with that and moving it in the right way. And none of those words are said in a negative way or a negative connotation. They're said in a way of me knowing what that can produce for an individual or a partnership, following that game plan. And the simple fact is the reason why our investors scale so much harder and faster than anyone else is because they follow that game plan and they follow that way of investing. And if you want to go down the negative gearing, long-term, long hold approach and all the rest of it, you're going to suffer a lot of pain investing for a long period of time. And you might get a win if you can stomach holding that for 20 or 30 years. But the simple reality is so many people actually cash out before that property ever produces anything because they can't stomach how much it is actually going to cost them the whole way through. So anyone that does listen to that or anyone that knows anyone that conforms to that idea of investing, I probably would really recommend sending them this podcast because even though that wasn't the avenue that we were planning on going down with this, it really has a huge amount of weight when you understand the difference between that, passive, long-term, long play hold, time in the market sort of style investing, the shit investing strategy versus really pushing hard, active investor, trying to achieve great results in a great time frame. And the reason why I say this, and I think the reason why this is so important is because when we're talking about your short-term decision-making, it's funny because now we're putting the shoe on the other foot in terms of actually saying, well, if you make short-term decisions that are going to give you short-term wins and plan around short-term wins, I'm not talking about quick wins of like a 50 grand in 6 months or 12 months. I'm talking about a nice compounded growth rate over 2, 3, 4, 5 year window, banking that, moving forward, keeping it moving like that. That is what actually is going to move you towards your goals significantly faster and really move that pendulum swing in a really, really short, aggressive manner. And ultimately, that's what we want to do. We want to get our money working for us fast. We want to make it working for us aggressively and growing and building, and that velocity of money, that compounding growth rate really taking off. When you embrace that, when you really, really embrace that and understand that that is a strategy that you need to use, both on the market entry and selecting a market and where you're willing to buy, and on the market exit and strategically planning for that as well, that is where the shift will happen that will take you to different levels, where the Peter Contoses of the world have that ability to scale hard because they were willing to make the hard decisions in the short term that they knew that would impact them both in the short term and the long term. And this is why, short-term thinking, so often the short-term thinking could be, I want to hold it. I just want to see what it does. I want to see what it's going to do over the next 1, 2, 3 years. The cycle's done, man. The cycle's done. Or if your money's going to perform significantly better somewhere else for you, and that's an anchor for you, cut that thing and then move it into something else. And this is where the short-term thinking has to be super strategic and it has to be cutthroat. This is business. Your portfolio is a business. You have to treat it like a business. If something is an anchor and there is no point holding it, then cut away that anchor. And what happens if you're in the ocean and the current and the wind and the storm and everything is pulling you in one way and you stay anchored, right? Hopefully you stay there, But if you cut away that anchor, then all of a sudden you're there, you're with the wind, wind's in the sails taking off. And so often, again, we go back to Pete's story there. That is he cut away multiple anchors and made decisions that would benefit him and allowed him to move forward and fast in a short term. And again, we're talking short term. Maybe that is the perfect portfolio to be talking about because of what he did in a short term window. And whether that in itself potentially isn't possible for the average Australian, right, or the average investor, whatever, it's like, what can you do that could get you the extra deal a year or extra 2 deals a year? Or could you cut away that singular anchor that might add an extra 2 deals a year to the portfolio? Instead of doing 1 a year, we can now do 2 or 3 a year. So in 5 years, we're going to get to 15 or 10 or 15 properties instead of 5. So this is where actually short-term thinking can make you millions, right? To flip it on its head. This is where the short-term thinking, the strategic short-term, literally needle-moving things, when you put them into play properly, this is where it can make you millions. And so I think really understanding that and embracing that and pissing away all these people that try and say the other side of things, the time in the market bullshit, long-term holds, all that stuff, that is not for me because I don't want to make money over a 30-year window. I want to make it now. And I want to scale it and grow it aggressively now so I can achieve my goals in 5, 7, 10 years, not 30 years. If I ever even get there, because I probably can't even stomach the shit result for that period of time. And that's where we see so many people get stuck at 1, 2 invested properties, 3 invested properties, whatever it is, because they started with the wrong thing in mind and they were making short-term decisions, thinking they were making the right long-term decisions, but those short-term decisions were actually the incorrect ones.
So it's really interesting, and I love the way you've taken that, and it's a perfect way to wrap this up. But it's almost like the more educated you are, your short-term decisions can be really poor, or your short-term decisions can really accelerate your accumulation.
Yeah.
Because in that same finite period, you're making a decision, but you're just making a lazy decision based on what you're going to do in 30 years. But like Peter Kontos, he's obviously made a decisive decision because of all the work that he did beforehand. And he's been in the system a little while, right?
Yeah.
I love the quote that it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. Like, it seems like it's really quick, but he's put in the hard yards. Like, look at you. You've been doing the journey for 16 years. Yeah. Some people can say, yeah, you're lucky or this or some. They clearly don't understand. There were some decisive decisions that you made in the short term, but that's why you've got the results here. Yeah. But it wasn't just given to you, right?
For sure. For sure, man. I think we might change the title of the app to how short-term thinking can make you millions. Maybe that's a better one.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Because people will get to the end, they'll start and they'll be like, they won't understand until the last 10 minutes of the podcast.
Yeah, maybe.
Why we would change it down that avenue? Because, man, I think like in all reality, man, this is where thinking strategically, thinking aggressively in building a portfolio can change the game.
But I think what you're saying is when you're educated, you can make short-term decisions that really make a massive difference. But on the flip side, your short-term decision, like let's just say you're at home, you got some kids or whatever, and you can't be asked, and you're like, I'll get it to the next time. It's easier just to go to the pub and watch the footy, or I'll do it next week. That's a short-term decision that is costing you millions because of the inaction.
Yeah.
And I've done that. I made short-term, put your head in the sand. That was a short-term decision. It felt good in the moment, but I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And that's what cost me millions, right? Whereas when I worked with you and we made a quick decision and we bought 4 properties in the first 12 months, probably the first 2 deals straight away, that was a very quick decision, but I'd piss-farted around for 10 years.
Yeah.
So the short-term decisions can really be your friend if you're educated or you got the right team, or can really cost you a lot of money if you are uneducated, you're not prepared to put in the work, and you're not prepared to find someone who can help you.
100%, man. 100%. No, I couldn't agree more with all that, mate. And I think it's just thinking on a different level, thinking outside the box, thinking outside the norm, and be willing to challenge the norm.
Yeah, I love it.
Be willing to challenge the norm.
Yeah.
Go against the grain. And that's what I'm saying. If anyone's listening to this and they know someone that's been spouting that shit, or maybe you're the one that's been spouting that shit and someone has sent this to you, this is why, because challenging that style of thinking, going to the different level, making the short-term decisions that are going to really impact you in a positive way, whether it's realizing you need to time a market rather than time in the market, or whether it's realizing that you need to cut back on a few different things, to make the decisions, whatever they are, big or small, they're going to move the needles, especially in the short term. And this is the big thing, guys. The short-term thinking, you get that right, and whether it's a delayed gratification piece for a 6, 12, 24-month window. Again, I go back to that couple that I was talking about. We're talking about Pete, and they were talking about their journey, and they're living at home. So they've been out of home for like 5 years, and then they moved back home. They've been in home for 12 months, and they moved back home because they were successful in applying for mentoring with me, and then they moved back home because they knew it would massively boost their serviceability. And they've done that for this year, and then they're actually going to extend it for another 6 months because we've got another tranche coming through of deals, but they need to retain that little bit of borrowing for. It's going to fall perfectly in line with some exits, and so they're going to scale to that next sort of level before they then move out. That's an 18-month window. It's a short-term window, and it's like, yeah, all right, like it wouldn't be the most enjoyable thing in the world. I look at the biggest window I had in acquisition in my first 10 years. It was that time where I moved home after I realized that my borrowing was stuffed, and I moved home for a 12-month window and massively boosted my serviceability through it, especially when I understood the creative lending piece. Yeah, man, those small things, and it might seem like a while, a 12, 24-month window. Yes, in the scheme of things, it's a period of time that might be a little bit sucky for you. But what's on the other end of it? They never would have been able to buy. They're going to do 7 deals in 12 months. They'll probably hit 10 deals in an 18-month window. They might have hit 2 or 3. 2 or 3, man, compared to like 7 or 10. Like, how is that going to affect them by the time in the next 5 years? By making those correct decisions and being willing to eat shit to get rich, being willing to delay that gratification for a period of time.
Yeah,
the compounding effect. Remember, we go back to the compounded growth rate versus the compounded cost rate. All right, they might have had one cool, cushy year, being out living. I mean, there's still stresses involved with it regardless, versus eating shit for 12 months to then give them 12 to 18 months to then give them this leg up that'll, they're 25, 26 or whatever it is. But whether you're 35, 36, I don't care. If you're not in the position to be able to make decisions like that, then maybe decisions like that will significantly change your life. And your excuse might be that you can't afford to buy a property. I'll never be able to save a deposit. Our pace is blah, 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 blah. Well, what if you were able to cut your rent in half and save another 20, 30 grand a year, or move back home and completely eliminate $600, $800 a week in rent, plus all bills and everything as well? Eat shit, get rich. Like, what is the result of this thing if we get it right? So I think it's this delayed gratification piece, doing this thing properly, being willing to embrace it, going against the norm. Don't listen to the long-term bullshit these guys have been pumping for years because they're still asleep. They're still.
What do you think they do? Do you think they're just lazy? Do you think where's the merit in it?
Like, why are they going to change it? Like, it doesn't fall out. It's like, they got enough clients that have been around that long. They just keep selling the same shit that people believe. It's as simple as that. Like, they're a retirement village doing deals. I don't even know if they're doing deals. You know what I mean? But like,
and you can't be accountable on a deal that you're going to say, we'll just wait 20 years and it'll
they're
do well.
They're just going to be dead in 20 years. How are they going to be accountable for that? I told you in 20 years, there's the voice note that gets sent out after 20 years. I told you to do something in that period of time. I don't know, mate. I'm loose cannon, so I don't know what's wrong with me. Anyway.
I love it, Sammy. I think we've nailed it. I actually love the way we've taken this topic because
so do I.
Because it is interesting, and I think people, I'm sure they're going to stick to the end and they're going to get a lot of value out of it. But
if they miss the last 10 minutes, mate, then maybe they had to snooze the retirement village with that.
Maybe. But I think it's great. I love breaking these things down and getting inside the mindset of, because it is a mindset thing, right?
Yep.
Those short-term decisions, they're active. And the reason why I love the education piece so much, and I think people don't make the connection, is the more educated you are, the better questions you ask and the better short-term decisions you're going to make and the better long-term impacts they're going to have. So you need to reverse engineer that. That compounding effect of education is the same as the compounding effect of wealth. It's exactly the same. So you can't be expected to make a decision if you don't understand.
Yep.
And that's why we go full circle as to why APS has been so successful.
I think I'm going to trademark compounding cost rate. I like that.
I like it.
I don't think anyone's done that before.
Kel,
compounding cost rate versus compounding growth rate. Don't laugh, Kelly. It's a fucking great idea, all right? Listeners, Jimmy, you done?
Done. Let's go and have something to eat.
Let's go something. I want chili scramble from Palm Springs.
Some bucking and eggs.
Listeners, thanks for tuning in. Until next week's on Scouting Straight podcast. Love yous.